Thank you very much for joining us for the final session of the 2025 Korean Association of International Studies annual meeting, featuring a roundtable discussion by the next generation scholars from a variety of the countries. Even though we are not sitting in a round table, it's basically square tables and sitting in a straight line, but well, this is a roundtable discussion. And before getting started, I would like to convey my greatest gratitude to the Korea Foundation for supporting this wonderful opportunity. And I would also like to thank the Korean Association of International Studies and the organizing committee for all the time and efforts in preparing for these three-day events in the beautiful city of Yeosu. I'm Sonil Kim of the College of International Studies at Kyunghee University, and honored to chair the roundtable discussion entitled "The Prospect of Conflict and Cooperation in East Asia in the Era of Great Power Politics." Basically, we are going to discuss one of the oldest and rather obsolete topic in Asia, but it does not mean that this issue of conflict and cooperation in Asia is insignificant or unimportant, but completely opposite. It is an old issue because it has not been effectively addressed for the past century. And that's why I believe the Korea Foundation organized this roundtable discussion with next generation panelists to have some fresh ideas that may offer the new visions and possibilities to break through the problems. For this, we definitely should begin with a diagnosis followed by a prescription. So I'm going to allocate the discussion time with a couple of segments. First, we are going to have a presentation by panelists about their thoughts on the fundamental, historical, and structural sources of conflict and instability in the region, particularly the security-related issues such as the North Korean nuclear problems or the Russian-Ukrainian war and the cross-strait issue in China, and the Indo-Pakistani conflicts, the contention in Myanmar, etc., etc. I particularly asked them to address why the causes of conflict and instability have not been resolved since the end of the Cold War, despite the growing interdependence and overall economic prosperity. So once we have a diagnosis, we should propose a prescription. So we will have a time to listen to each panelist's view on building cooperation in Asia during the Trump era, which has made virtually everything unstable and unpredictable. I particularly asked each panelist to think about his or her view on what Asian nations should do amid the growing political and economic nationalism, competition, and so-called blockization. And I will pass the microphone to the panelists in the order of seating. So when you begin your presentation, so please briefly introduce yourself before the presentation. And let's get started. So why don't you start with the Mr. Lee Zhao-yong.
Okay. Professor Kim, scholar panelists, and audience members, good afternoon.
Please push the microphone. Yeah.
I'm sorry. Yeah. Okay. My name is Li Zhaoyong. I'm from China. I'm a fourth semester PhD student in the Department of Political Science at Yonsei University. My primary field of research is political economy, with a particular focus on climate change and energy transition. It's a great honor for me to participate in today's discussion. I believe the topic we are discussing today contains three keywords: great power politics era, conflict, and cooperation. First, the great power politics area signifies that with China's rise, strategic competition between China and the US has become a structural norm, and East Asia has emerged as the primary area of the rivalry. The US has pursued its dominance by promoting mechanisms like the Indo-Pacific strategy and the Chip for Alliance aiming to economic decoupling, technology containment, and military encirclement under Samoriad high-fence framework. Meanwhile, China, while continuing its development and safeguarding core interests, is also striving for greater institutional voice in the international order. Second, the risk of conflict in East Asia remains persistent. Hotspot issues such as the South China Sea disputes, the Taiwan Strait tensions, and the North Korean nuclear problems are all highly sensitive. And Japan is accelerating its path toward becoming a normal state. Moreover, Japan's historical revisionism, such as efforts to downplay its wartime aggression, has further intensified political distrust with China and South Korea. What these conflicts share in common is the absence of effective multilateral security mechanisms to manage crises. Finally, I believe that cooperation remains an indispensable path forward for East Asia. I believe that East Asia's future should not be framed as a binary choice between confrontation and submission. Rather, we must strive to find institutional buffers within structured tensions and seek constructive transformation within realist constraints. Thanks very much.
Thank you very much. And the next presenter will be Mr. Jong-hyuk.
Thank you. It is a true honor and privilege to be here among my colleagues, Zhao Yang and Bifabi, Intabong, Yulia, and Miu-sang. My name is Jung-hyuk Chung, and I'm a PhD student in international relations at Seoul National University, where my research focuses on the intricate dynamics of international security, deterrence, and alliance politics. I express my sincere gratitude to the Korea Foundation and the Korean Association of International Studies for organizing this invaluable conference. And a special thank you to Professor Kim Sun-il for moderating this discussion. Today, foundational, ever important, unresolved, this issue of status of conflict and cooperation in Asia is drawing from recent academic discussions and policy debates. Asia, despite its remarkable economic dynamism, remains a hotbed of enduring conflicts. The escalating nuclear and missile programs on the Korean Peninsula present an acute and destabilizing threat, challenging existing deterrence framework and strategic stability. This environment suggests that Asia's relative peace is a precarious equilibrium, highly vulnerable to disruption and further destabilization. Indeed, existing security dilemmas, coupled with pervasive lack of trust among states, amplify the severity of these conflicts and further aggravated by the recent great power politics and competition. However, alongside these persistent conflicts, cooperation in Asia presents a more nuanced picture. The region demonstrates its strongest collaborative efforts in economic, technological, and social domains characterized by robust trade, digital transformation, and cultural exchanges that foster a sense of regional community. However, political and security cooperation remains notably weak, often hampered by the limitations of traditional multilateralism and the rise of external minilateral initiatives, which challenge broader institutional cohesion. While economic interdependence is undeniably high, It acts as a double-edged sword, fostering reliance, but also creating vulnerabilities that can lead to competition rather than solely promoting peace. The second Trump administration factor, despite its destabilizing transactional nature, has paradoxically compelled Asian nations to seek greater self-reliance and strengthen their intra-regional security and economic architectures, often through diplomatic hedging and enhancing trilateral partnerships. Going forward, the foremost agenda for Asian states should be pragmatically prioritize non-traditional security challenges like health and environmental cooperation, as these offer significant common ground and a higher likelihood of success. This approach emphasizes building stability incrementally through sub-regional initiatives, serving as foundational steps toward a more integrated and resilient regional order amid diverse national interests and the ongoing impact of technological advancements that both fuel competition and offer new avenues for collaboration. Thank you, and I look forward for our discussion.
Okay, thank you very much. The next is Ms. Tong-suk Vipavi. Okay.
Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you so much for the opportunity for me to participate here in the roundtable discussion today. So my name is Vipavi Tong-suk, and I am from Thailand, and I am currently pursuing a master's degree in international relations at Yonsei University. So my research interest lies in refugees, or more broadly on the forced displacement, and specifically in Southeast Asia, which is my hometown. And in studying that, I have become more and more interested in how identity shapes both conflict and cooperation within the region. So when we talk about identity, it often sounds really abstract, but it manifests concretely in our politics and must be addressed practically. So as someone from Thailand, I have observed firsthand how identity tensions influence relations between neighboring countries, leading to both cooperation and conflict in the region. For example, the ongoing civil war in Myanmar, it continues to spill into borders, or similarly, the tension between Thailand and Cambodia, which is also currently just flared up at the moment, and there's the ongoing tension between Thailand and Cambodia right now. So if you look at these conflicts, there are not isolated phenomena, but they reflect a broader regional pattern evident elsewhere in Asia. For example, Kashmir, the Taiwan Strait, or even tensions in the Korean Peninsula. So these disputes persist not only because of the conflicting material interests. Of course, material interests or security issues, they can play a big part too, but at the same time, identity significantly shapes perceptions of legitimacy, sovereignty, and national narratives. And historically, identity conflicts in Asia are rooted in the colonial legacy, where artificially drawn borders disrupted cultural communities and imposed unequal hierarchies. And in the post-colonial periods, many Asian nations actively engaged in nation building, and along that, they consolidated their national identities to ensure political stability. However, this identity has frequently caused and intensified conflicts rather than alleviating them. And for example, as I am from ASEAN has limitations in addressing tensions in the regions. For example, disputes in the South China Sea, it is often framed as territorial rights, but it also resonates deeply with nationalist identity tied to historical narratives. And that's why it complicates collective regional positions and cooperation. And more importantly, it is because the institutions these days are built on frameworks to cooperate on the surface rather than addressing past conflicts. So that is also why ASEAN has been limited in addressing this tension as well. So we can see that with the lack of institutions and frameworks to address the tensions and past issues, these institutions can amplify these conflicting identity, and at the same time, this identity also amplify the structural limitation set by these existing institutions as well, like the non-interference principle of the ASEAN. And I believe that is why Asia is at the moment ripe with conflict, not because new conflicts keep arising, but because they were never addressed in the first place. And that is also why there are many instances of failures of cooperation, because conflicts still exist, and that is why cooperation cannot be stable or long-lasting. Moreover, in the current era of the great power politics, unresolved identity conflicts can significantly escalate regional instability, providing opportunities for major powers to exploit the existing division. So proactively managing these identity-related tensions through practical, institutionalized cooperation become not merely beneficial, but strategically necessary. And thank you. I look forward to today's discussion.
Thank you. And the next introductory remarks will be by Mr. Tong So Lin.
Good afternoon. First of all, I would like to thank you, and I am honored to be in these sections. So my name is Tong So Lin. Currently processing my master's degree in comparative politics at the Korea University. I am originally from Laos, and my academic interests focus on the East and the Southeast Asia political economies, particularly in the state capacities, regional cooperation, and the economic development in the transitional economies. So today's East Asia stands at a critical crossroad. Despite depending economic interdependence, we are witnessing the rise of the systemic measures, especially among China's, the US, and the regional actors. So long-standing security fast point, like the Korean Peninsula and the Taiwan Strait and the South China Sea remain unresolved. Even areas like the technology and the trades have become field of the contestations. However, history reminds us that the confrontations is not inevitable. East Asia had a strong legacy of the pragmatic cooperation, whether toward ASEAN-centric diplomacy, regional trade agreement, or informal yet effective multilateralisms. Amidst uncertainties, especially during and after the Trump year, it is critical for the ASEAN country to reclaim agency not towards bloc politics, but where the flexible issues-based or issues-based diplomacies, economic diversifications, and institution buildings that reflect both the strategic reality and the developmental aspirations of our peoples. So in today's discussion, I hope we can explore how to build a cooperative agriculture that avoids solutions, logic, and strictures of regional resilience for the future generations. To understand the cause and how to resolve the conflicts in the Southeast Asia that we are understand. First is about why does the conflicts persist despite the possibilities. So East Asia conflicts persist due to historical legacy like the unresolved turmoil from the World War II and the Cold War. So visible in the strained Japan-China-Korea relations and the China-Taiwan tensions. Another reason is the strategic mistrust like U.S. land areas are seen at the encirclement by the China with twinger arms race and the security dilemma. Unlike the Europe, East Asia lack abiding regional security institutions. Forum like the Asian Regional Forum exists, but without enforcement power. So additionally, some authoritarian regimes like North Korea and Myanmar resist reform due to the regime's survival interests. So finally, economics decouplings tend like U.S. export control and the chip war erode the foundations of interdependence that once held reduction tensions. To from these the conflicts to how can corporations to be rebuilt in the time and the time post-year. So I think we should solidify corporations beyond the grand arises. Middle power like Korea, Vietnam, or Indonesia can lend unilateral partnership on issues like the climate, digital age, or health. Also, institutions like ASEP or ASEAN Part 3 should be revitalized, offering inclusive platform instance of the exclusionary bloc. And also the country can also pursue strategy ambiguities, not the picking sides, but adapting issues by issues. Above all, we can use shared development narratives, infrastructure, green transitions, and the public health as a political ground to rebuild regional trust. So I hope we can discuss more. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And the next introductory remarks will be by the Ms. Sekardiadi.
Okay, thank you, Professor Kim. It's a pleasure to be here today. My name is Yulia, PhD student from Dunga University, Graduate School of International Studies. Regarding to today's topic, I would like to present from the Southeast Asia perspective, as I'm from Indonesia, so I would like to present from the Indonesian's point of view. The conflicts occurring in East Asia, particularly those that involve China and the United States, can consider affect Asian, especially Indonesia, in terms of economic, political, and security. Economic effect may involve a slowdown in growth, strain on the export industry, and increasing oil prices. Politically and diplomatically, there may be a pressure for Indonesia to adopt a position on global matters, while security-related consequences could encompass the risk of refugees, influxes, and the potential for radicalizations. Economic impact, for example, tension in East Asia might lead a rise in global oil prices as potential supply interrupts from regional production nation occur. Also, the conflict could interfere with global financial market, affecting the exchange rates of the currency and also foreign investment within Indonesia. Conflict in East Asia also have a potential to destabilize both regional and global order, as they may provoke an escalation of military or political tension in nearby nations. The tension in East Asia, while having adverse effect, can also open up positive avenues for Indonesia. One of the opportunity for diversifying export market and also boosting the manufacturing sector. For example, economic tension like the US-China trade war may create opportunities for Indonesia to expand the export to emerging markets like Africa, South Asia, and the Middle East. Indonesian manufacturing industry, particularly in electronic and also automotive sector, has the capability to expand by substituting Chinese product to the US market. And the second part, I would like to highlight the impact, opportunity, and also contribution of Southeast Asia in peacekeeping effort, Indonesian viewpoint, especially. In my opinion, the situation on the Korean Peninsula remain unsolved because of two factors. The first one, the North Korea operates under a strict authoritarian communist regime, while in South Korea follows a liberal democratic structure with a market-based economy. These core differences present significant challenges in achieving consensus on the type of government for the unified nations. The second one, North Korean nuclear ambitions contribute to the challenge of reunifications. The ongoing development of the nuclear weapons program has heightened anxiety and distrust in South Korea and among other nations. Indonesia actually has the potential to play a role in fostering peace on the Korean Peninsula. A neutral nation with positive ties both North and South Korea, Indonesia poses a strong advantage. There is a strategic economic partnership agreement between Indonesia and South Korea. And also, additionally, Indonesia and North Korea have maintained bilateral relationships since 1961. Regionally, Indonesia has the opportunity to collaborate with ASEAN as well as China, Japan, and South Korea to pursue North Korea to view peace as a viable option. Those developing a narrative that resonate with all parties and bring them to the negotiating table is very, very essential. Lastly, ASEAN is believed to have a role in fostering peace on the Korean Peninsula. Even though the ASEAN negotiation process tends to be slow, it fosters trust. So the key point is trust. The neutrality is offered can also serve as an asset for engaging with North Korea. So the key point is actually trust and neutrality. That's all my presentation for today. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And the final introductory remark will be by Ms. Narita.
Hello everyone. Thank you very much for having me here today. My name is Miyu Narita from Japan. I am a master's student at Seoul National University majoring in Korean Studies. My main research interest lies in Japanese perception of the colonial past and historical friction between Japan and Korea. Today, I'd like to present on the topic the influence on Japan's security policy and constitutional reform debate on peace in East Asia. This topic is really important to be considered in the great power politics era, since America-China relations or Russia-Ukraine war became a main reason for Japan's new security policy or change in the constitutional reform debate. As previous researchers have mentioned, the historical context of East Asia, particularly Japan's colonial invasion and Pacific War infringement, continues to significantly shape regional dynamics. And in this context, Japan's current stance on security policy has a substantial impact on the entire East Asian region, which reminds of past painful traumatic experiences of each Asian country. And as member of the next generation in East Asia, I believe that paying attention to and engaging in transnational discussion on Japanese security issue is really crucial in preventing future severe political tension or military conflict. In this presentation, I mainly raised two questions. How has Japan's security policy evolved and what controversies have emerged as a result of these changes? And secondly, how have these shifts in Japan's security policy impacted broader security dynamics in East Asia, especially the South Korea and China? Given the time limit, I will provide a brief responses to each. First, the Japanese government, led by the Liberal Democratic Party, has attempted to revise Article 9 of the Constitution, whose fundamental content is abandonment of war for Japan, to explicitly justify the existence of the self-defense forces. And this push includes significant moves such as the Abe administration 2040 cabinet decision, partially allowing the right to collective self-defense, and the former Kishida administration's more recent increase in defense spending with new security policy. However, these developments have been really controversial in domestic sphere and the international sphere. One major issue is the lack of democratic process domestically. Despite there was a strong public opposition, such as the student movement, SHIELD, these decisions were implemented unilaterally. And another important issue is, as I said, international dimension, that East Asian countries, especially China and the South Korean government, officially criticizes the decision of collective self-defense. Both countries point out these policies can be a contradictory contradicted with post-war Japan's stance as a peace country and abandoning a war. And for Chinese government also concerns the use of China's Red Sea as for a justification of the militarization of Japan. And also, even the citizens in each country start to be afraid and also show aversion against Japanese society, seeing that Japan started to become more militaristic or imperialistic again, which remind of the past traumatic history. So this somehow negatively impact on the relationship between Japan and South Korea, not only a diplomatic sphere, but also the citizen society. However, at the same time, I believe that this moment highlights the growing importance of citizens' engagement across East Asia. After all, it is the people of East Asia who will be mostly directly affected by the outcomes of peace or conflict discussion, diplomacy in the region. Therefore, debates on constitutional reform and security policy should not be confined to governments or political elite, and there should be active involvement from ordinary citizens who should have the opportunity to express their views and shape the future of regional peace. Not only people from other Asian countries such as China or South Korea, as I mentioned, Japanese citizens ourselves started to recognize how it is really dangerous for Japanese government to expand the military policy or new security policy. So the shared desire among East Asian citizens to avoid a war and a militarization or conflict point to the potential for grassroots transnational solidarity. And as a student studying this field, I would really appreciate to participate in this kind of discussion, because this kind of discussion itself as a form of regional solidarity. So thank you very much for your attention, and I would expect a deeper discussion about this issue. Thank you.
Thank you very much, and thank you for the wonderful introduction. And now it's time to begin the discussion to diagnose the Asia. So there's a term called the Asian paradox. I believe all of you have heard that. In a nutshell, it refers to a phenomenon that the growing interdependence among the countries, particularly the economic interdependence, has not translated into the political cooperation. And why there is no such a thing like the NATO in Asia. So then what interrupts the Asian nations from building more cooperative relationship? And in the introductory remarks, the panelists briefly actually touched upon some issues like the underdeveloped multilateral security mechanism in Asia and the identity issues or the lack of institutions and historical legacy and conflict of political interest and disruption of supply chain and post-war legacy and security issues. And then let's listen how each panelist see what ails Asia now and what are the fundamental and structural problems. Since we have panelists from a variety of countries like China, Korea, and the Thailand, and Laos, Indonesia, and Japan, I believe we can have fresh and insightful observations. So let's begin with Mr. Lee.
For that question, I would like to explain it from three dimensions. First is fundamental causes. The second is historical continuities, and third is structural dilemmas. First, at the fundamental level, strategic competition among major powers has created persistent structural tensions and instability. The unipolar moment following the end of the Cold War did not lead to lasting peace. Instead, the power shift between China and the US has sparked a new round of geopolitical confrontation. The US perceived China's rise as a systemic challenge to its hegemony, particularly in East Asia. Moreover, the US has framed the US-China rivalry as an ideological struggle between democracy and authoritarianism, this competition goes beyond economics and technology. It also concerns who leads in setting international rules. In contrast, China emphasized cooperative leadership through initiatives like the BRI and RCEP. This competitive logic has led many regional hotspot issues to be absorbed into the broader great power rivalry, thus obstructing the formation of effective solutions. Second, from the historical perspective, many of the region's ongoing conflicts are rooted in unresolved historical traumas. It's silly. This is unfinished histories that continues. Institutional gaps in today's regional security architecture, allowing risk could be perceived and intensify. Third, from a structural standpoint, economic integration has not translated into corresponding levels of security trust. The created regional instructional landscape is very fragmented. The US and Japan promoted the Indo-Pacific framework. China advised the BRI, and ASEAN attempts to retain its role as a neutral coordinator. And what's more, the international political logic of many countries, such as populism, nationalism, and the need to perceive legitimacy, often incentivize leaders to adopt confrontational foreign policy. This coupling of domestic policies and external conflict further narrows the path to peace. Including the root cause of conflict in East Asia, lying in the transfer of global power, unresolved historical disputes, and the anarchic nature of the international system. While economic interdependence has raised the cost of conflict, it has not eliminated the pursuit of relative gains by major powers. Without the concurrent support of political will, institutional frameworks, and shared identity, instability and conflict will continue to cast a shadow over the East Asian order. Yeah, that's just my opinion. Yeah, thanks very much. Yeah.
Okay, thank you very much. And Lee points out the kind of persistence of Cold War legacy, which has interrupted the building of political and even economic cooperation, kind of as a result of fragmentation. And thank you very much for the good observation. And the next will be Mr. John.
Thank you, Professor Kim, on your prescient and also relevant point on the Asian paradox, which despite the deepening interdependence, the resolution of conflicts and competition among Asian states remains a far and perennial goal, which is unachieved yet. Well, based on the insights gleaned from our colleague discussion and also our own researches, my thoughts on the structural and dyadic and relational sources of conflict and instability in Asia center on a complex interplay of persistent grievances, shifting power dynamics, and pervasive lack of credibility, all exacerbated by geopolitical trends, which makes interdependence accentuate mutual vulnerability instead of cooperation. At a relational and dyadic level, Asian states grapples with lack of mutual credibility due to states' capabilities to threaten others, well, from their military powers, and also competition of relative interest intermingled with the great power competitions and their alliance networks, and also unfavorable reputation from unresolved historical antagonisms and entrenched border disputes that have simmered since the Cold War. Structurally, the region lacks robust, effective multilateral security institutions capable of mediating these disputes or building genuine collective security, further weakening its capacity for conflict resolutions. And as my colleagues have discussed, these kind of competitive identity conflicts, as Miyu-san and also Inthavong has mentioned, is still pervasive at a citizen level as well, which degrades the cooperative spirit in our identity politics, as Bifavi has mentioned. So then we have to move on to overall the regional order's power distribution, and institutional agreements and normative identities are demonstratively unstable and prone to conflicts, as the spread effects from the Ukraine conflict has also transmitted to the Asia's regional security dynamics. Also, the intensifying US-China rivalry acts as a primary amplifier, pushing the region into a precarious equilibrium. The systemic competition exacerbates existing flashpoints, further aggravating the prospect of conflict cooperation in the region, raising the likelihood of future conflicts and suggesting that Asia is indeed vulnerable to further destabilization. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. As Mr. Chung raised an interesting point, the lack of mutual kind of credibility and the issue of reputations, partly due to the kind of historical legacy and partly due to the hegemonic power competition and rivalry, as well as the kind of persistence of the security problems in the region. Thank you. And the next will be Ms. Tong-suk.
So the question is that we have the economic cooperation, but it's not really successful. The conflicts still exist. So in order to answer the question, I think that we need to look beyond just economic cooperation and really consider the deeper historical and structural roots of these tensions. I also agree with all the points that previous panelists mentioned. So many of these issues, for example, the security issues like the North Korea nuclear program, the cross-strait tensions, the conflict in Myanmar, or the India-Pakistan rivalry, we all know that it didn't appear out of nowhere. A lot of them have roots in colonial era decisions that fragmented communities, and as equally important, it is what happened afterwards. So many of them engaged in aggressive nation building after independence, and that often meant pushing for a single dominant national story, and that usually the one that excluded the minorities and also the ones that frame others as the others, us, them, insider, outsider, friends, foes. And over time, that created frustration and resentment that's still unresolved today. And that is the point that many other panelists has also mentioned as well, about how the conflicts remain unresolved. So, for example, if you take Kashmir, the India and Pakistan conflicts between the borders, it is not just about the borders, but the thing is, India and Pakistan have wrapped the region into how they define themselves as nations. And that makes any compromise feel like giving something up as the national identity. Or the Taiwan Strait, as we know, it shows a very similar pattern where two very different political identities, they try to assert the legitimacy over the same space. So now, economic cooperation, economic growth is often expected to fix these kind of things, to bring peace, but it doesn't really work because when deeper divisions or deeper conflicts, they go under-addressed. So what we often see is that economic or any kind of operations, they tend to happen in areas where difficult legacies can be brushed aside. Because institutions, the orders these days, they are often built to make that possible. For example, ASEAN, it is a good example. The ASEAN framework make it really easy to cooperate economically, but at the same time, it also sides up political friction inside the institution as well. So when conflict arises that challenge the core national narratives or historical grievances, the same setup that enabled the economic cooperation, it also makes it hard for historical grievances or makes it hard to respond to such conflicts as well. So that is also about the limitation of the design of institutions these days. And at the same time, it also reflects how many of today's conflicts are structural, and it tied to how authority and legitimacy were built in the very first place. And this becomes even more urgent today because in today's geopolitical climate, with great power competition, especially between the US and China, they tend to amplify the existing division in the region. And these powers often engage with Asia through the framework built more for strategic alignment than for addressing deeper structural issues. For example, the institutions, it has become really unstable because the conflicts has never been addressed. So that kind of institutions are institutional cooperation. It has been weak from the very beginning, and that's why cooperation has been unstable and conflicts keep rising. So if Asian nations don't find ways to think how regional cooperation is structured, ways that engage more honestly with the region's political and historical realities, external actors will keep reinforcing these cracks instead of helping to bridge them. And that shows how the issue of the conflicts has become really structural, historical, and foundational. And I think that is how we should address at the very core of it. Thank you.
Thank you. And Ms. Tong-soo traces back further to the imperialism and colonialism, which has made the issue of the complicated identities kind of salient and pervasive, as well as the cumulative experience of the unresolved conflicts through kind of proper institutions, and also the great power competition, which has aggravated the situation. Okay, thank you. And next will be Mr. Tong-soo Lin.
Thank you for the questions. So as presented earlier, one of the biggest pushes in the East Asia is the gap between economic interdependence and the lack of the robust political or security cooperations, unlike Europe, where economics and the political integrations move hand in hand. Asia remains fragmented despite deep trade and the investment link. So from my perspective, the interruptions stem from a structural absence of the trust and institutional alignments. So first, historical legacies and unresolved memory, especially from the colonial and the Cold War periods, so continue to shape regional narratives. These historical tensions are not just in the textbook. They influence how the state perceives each other in intentions. The second is about the power asymmetry. So particularly the strategic competition between the US and the China's make the middle and smaller power countries. Many nations are reluctant to choose side, and these hanging behaviors prevent the formations of the cohesive security framework like the NATO's. The third is the institution weakness is a core issue. Asia does not have the strong multilateral security institution that includes all major power, while ASEAN play a central role in the facilitating dialogue toward the mechanism like the ASEAN Regional Forum and the East Asia Summit. It is still operate on the consensus and non-interference. The limiting it is ability to respond decisively to security threats. So finally, we must not overlook diverse domestic policies and the regime ties. A country in ASEAN from the liberal democracies to authoritarian regimes is with different governance. So philosophy and the foreign policy strategy, this diversity make arrangement difficult beyond the economic interest. So that might say, I believe the pragmatic issues-based cooperation, especially in the area like the climate resilience, infrastructure, and the digital governance, offer a promising way forward. ASEAN does not need to copy another, but it does need confidence building, institution innovations, and inclusive regionalisms that reflect both the great power dynamic and the voice of the smaller state. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And Mr. Tong So Lin also brought about the issue of memory, which has constrained the building of institutions for cooperation. Also, the interesting point is the power asymmetry or imbalance among the members of the region, and also the different political conditions, like regime types, has also interrupted the confidence building among nations. Very interesting points. And then let's move on to the Ms. Sekhardiati.
Okay, thank you for the questions. In my opinion, the ongoing conflict in Asia are not a single phenomenon, but the result of a series of complex and interconnected factors. For some, the main causes include, the first one is the economic and social injustice. The economic inequality and social injustice can create tension that lead to the conflict, particularly when obsessed groups seek to change of the status quo. The second one is diplomatic failures. The failure of diplomacy and peaceful conflict resolution often lead to escalation, whether the form of civil war, regional conflict, or even the global wars. The third one is the advance in military technology. Rapid development in military technology, including weapons of mass destruction, can increase the intensity and scale of conflict, as well as prolong their durations. And the last one, the non-state actors. The emergence of non-state actors such as terrorist groups or transactional criminal organizations also contributes to ongoing conflict, often with motive different from the traditional state-based wars. Also, I want to highlight the Asian countries need to strengthen regional cooperation to respond to challenge and the size of opportunities. The first one, I want to highlight that to strengthen economic corporations, diversify market and supply chains in detail to reduce the dependence on a single country or region, especially in terms of trade and investment. Also, promote regional economic integrations, strengthen intra-Asia economic ties to free trade and investment agreement. Also, to strengthening the regional cooperations, ASEAN and forums such as ASEAN +3 and APEC should be optimized as platform for the inclusive cooperations. And lastly, strengthen the dialogue and also diplomacy. To strengthen the way is with the strengthen ASEAN, utilize ASEAN as a platform to enhance regional cooperation and respond to global challenges. Yes, I think that's all my opinion. Thank you, Professor.
Okay. Thank you very much. And Ms. Sekhardiati wrote about interesting issue of the economic inequality and social injustice and the failed diplomatic resolutions. At the same time, another interesting point is the non-state actors, such as the transnational criminal organizations, which has kind of interrupted the building of the relationship among the nations. And thank you very much. And finally, Ms. Narita.
Yes, thank you. I consider the cause of instability in East Asia, despite of economic prosperity, deeply related with unresolved nature of history, especially for Japan, as other presenters mentioned. Its colonial past has continued a fundamental obstacle to diplomatic relations with Korean Peninsula and China or any other countries, and changes in the stance of successive administration in each countries regarding colonial and historical issues have often altered the depth and the direction of diplomatic ties, which result in the instability in diplomatic sphere, I believe. And in particular, the Japan-South Korea Basic Treaty of 1965 left unresolved fundamental differences in the interpretation of prior treaties or prior treaties. So Japan's inconsistent responses to key historical recognition issues, such as the comfort women and forced labor, have continued to hinder diplomatic reconciliation. Moreover, the issue is that the recent resurgence of far-right activities or conservative activities in Japan, including hate speech directed at the Zainichi Korean or any other foreign resident, has gradually become mainstream or rather translated into Japanese main political parties, and this trend have influenced national policy, as I mentioned, the Japanese renewed security stance. Here, I believe that these dynamics have exacerbated the security dilemma in East Asia, whole East Asia, since China perceives Japan's increased defense spending and its enhanced security tie with the United States as a contaminant strategy, so thereby intensifying tensions over Taiwan and the East China Sea. Meanwhile, North Korea has repeatedly used Japan's action or militarization or any other renewed security policy as a pretext for missile tests or nuclear tests, creating a circle of escalation under the logic of defensive militarization. So I believe that like how Japan considers the political past or the unresolved nature of history between countries is a really important matter in the cause of instability. And moreover, about the economic prosperity, one reason why economic prosperity has failed to prevent conflict lies in the relative equalization of economic positions and power relations, with the significant rise of South Korea and China in economic sphere. The issues of historical memory or historical experiences, once diplomatically marginalized, have been elevated in priority between the diplomatic relation between Japan, and both countries now possesses the diplomatic resources to pursue them assertively. So that's why I believe that those economic prosperity in one hand can fortify the relation in East Asia. However, at the same time, this allows to go deeper in the historical issues. So in sum, the diplomatic confrontation rooted in these historical friction between Japan, China, and South Korea, like main country in East Asia, have significantly hindered the resolution of broader source of conflict and instability across Asia. So in this point, how the issue of history should be dealt in a diploma, other than the type of cooperation such as science or technology or economy, we have to think of how those issues of history should be dealt. I think that's my observation toward the issue of instability in East Asia. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And since Ms. Narita brought about the issue of the still persistent legacy of the history and the national identity issues, also the security dilemma, which should be overcome in order to build any kind of cooperative relationship among Asian nations. So now we have diagnosed Asia. A patient, according to the diagnosis, is in critical condition, is about to die. It seems that there is no cure available because the history issues and security dilemma, or the asymmetric and unequal political and economic conditions, and global competition, which is sometimes dubbed as a new Cold War. And also, in addition to that, the augmented the global power competition, particularly the G2 competition, and the economic nationalism under the new Trump administration, which is really unfavorable for building cooperation in Asia. But we have to find a way. in the era of complex and multi-layered crisis, which is the grand theme of this annual meeting. So please share your prescriptions. Okay. So let's begin with Mr. Lee.
Yeah, thanks for your questions. It's very difficult question. Yeah, I think. First, I think the impact of the Trump area United States on regional order can be seen in three main aspects. First, a complete withdrawal from existing multilateral economic frameworks, such as the withdrawal from the TPP, the weakening of trust-based ties with traditional alliances, such as demands for higher defense cost sharing from ties with from South Korea and Japan. Third is a systematic campaign of commitment against China in technology, finance, and society, and pushing forward the trade of decoupling. So the foremost task for Asia is to enhance institutional resilience and strategic autonomy. On one hand, in addressing economic nationalism, we should adopt a process-oriented, constructivist approach to regional cooperation, particularly through a mechanism like RCEP. There is significant complementarity among China, South Korea, and Japan in hydrogen energy, so solar power, and battery technologies. The uncertainty in U.S. climate policy during the Trump years, in fact, offered an opportunity for ASEAN countries to accelerate climate cooperation. In addition, countries like China, South Korea, and Japan should promote cooperation in fields such as the digital economy and aging societies to build an institutional firewall against external protectionism. On the other hand, in confronting bloc dynamics and camp-based polarization, Asia must strengthen the inclusive multilateral frameworks, particularly by revitalizing ASEAN's Central and the China, Korean, Japan, the trilateral mechanism. ASEAN's experience with impartial enmeshment is especially valuable, offering strategic middle ground for dialogue among countries with differing positions. By promoting norms such as non-interference and consensus-based decision-making, ASEAN can enhance its moral legitimacy as the neutral mediator. Moreover, all parties need resist ideological confrontation and return to a shared development consensus as a foundation for unity beyond the block logic. The Trump America First approach exposed the fragility of U.S. lead order, and the Asian nation can recenter around a development-oriented consensus. And middle powers such as South Korea and Indonesia, positioned between major powers, can form flexible cooperation networks. Looking forward, rebuilding Asia's operative order need to take the form of multi-layered, multi-centered network system. I think we must believe that as long as we uphold the principle of openness, institutional innovation, and inclusive governance, Asia can indeed build instruments of low politics cooperation and crisis management mechanism in the unpredictability of great power rivalry, and transform East Asia from a competitive arena into laboratory of cooperation. Yeah, thank you very much. Thanks.
Thank you very much. So Lee suggested kind of decoupling of politics and economic issues, and it's kind of, as you pointed out, a kind of constructivist approach, and the RCEP and other institutional framework is emerging, and so that might be the evidence or the that can back up your constructivist approach, and promoting and diffusing multilateral norms to build confidence and increase interdependence, which also kind of implies that you are a constructivist. And building and empowering networks among Asian nations is also suggested, a kind of the optimistic view, which the other panelists, some of them might not agree. Let's see. Okay, so let's move on to Mr. Zhang.
Thank you, Professor Kim. As my respected colleague Zhao Yang has emphasized the constructive approach, then allow me to emphasize more of a realist approach as a student in international security and deterrence and strategic stability. As Professor Kim has precisely pointed out, current global power competition and the second Trump administration factor is causing a structural transformation, which the states as units cannot fully resolve by their regional or individual approaches. So probably as of now, our foremost task would be to weather the storm instead of making a more ambitious approach to fully resolve the problem, and also to maybe mitigate the escalation risk, even if we could not solve it. But then what measures do we need to accomplish those kinds of more interim objectives? Well, first of all, Asian states should be in full throttle support to mitigate the great power rivalry between US and China. Well, of course, it is more of a systemic conflict, so there are limitations to what we could do. But then if there is a diplomatic or economic or security opportunities for Asian states to foster the cooperation or maybe even lessening of the competition between the two powers, then we should be in full support of it. But also, Asian states must recognize that strategic hedging is no more of an option, but maybe a necessity. As for U.S. allies like South Korea and Japan, strategic hedging via accepting the U.S. demand of burden sharing may mitigate their vulnerability to great power dynamics and risks of alliance entanglement. And then also, those two states are under the constraints of the alliance structure, so there are limitations to what we can do, but also we should be prepared as now the burden sharing and also the recalibration of the alliance is what US is demanding. And what should be done among the Asian states as a whole? Well, my colleagues, Bobby, Pavi, Yulia, and Miyu-san, everybody pointed out the necessity to reinforce the existing regional institutions and developing new mechanisms. I fully agree with the approach. But then if we maybe like refocus the regional scope into Northeast Asia, would South Korea and Japan, the US allies, would have the leverage or even their the strategic room to foster their own institutions? Well, we might be limited in that approach, but then I also fully agree that that is the options that we could also consider or at least support the other states doing it. And then focusing on non-traditional security issues as a common ground is a valuable point that that Inthabong has made, and also Bifavi has mentioned. Fostering our support in environmental and energy and technological issues could be a very useful venue for the Asian states to build their common interest on the ground. And also, as the Trump factor is, we are unsure whether this is a 4-year thing or maybe it's a long-standing structural transformation. But then as of all, Asian states should start making commitments that persist beyond those specific administrations. And I'm talking about not just the Trump administration, but also our own administrations in our own states. And also, we should make some cautious engagements in technological cooperations. As of now, the technological cooperation could be a valuable venue of our cooperation, but it is also a linchpin of competition among states, which is even aggravating the existential threats that states are perceiving against each other. As of now, the development in artificial intelligence and cyber capabilities, well, that is a great opportunity for our economic and social prosperity and also our human innovation. But then that is also aggravating the strategic instability as it is weakening the second strike capabilities of certain states have. And also, it is also opening the opportunities to make non-nuclear first strikes, which is also the foundation of the third nuclear age. As of now, a lot of technological innovations, including hypersonic weapons, cyber attacks, and also precision-guided attacks, is posing existential threats to states among us, and especially among the regional powers that have the capability and also have the responsibility to foster their cooperation among states. But then, as I've mentioned earlier, the lack of credibility among those states has remained as an aggravating factor for the regional cooperation. So to recap my opening statement, well, there are certain factors that cannot be resolved, but we should also strive to at least mitigate those factors by doing the things we can from systemic and regional cooperation levels. Thank you, and also I can move my point to my next colleague.
Okay, thank you very much. So Mr. Zhang pointed out the very interesting point that the Asian nations should play as a kind of mediator for the growing G2 competitions, utilizing their economic and political interdependence. But also point out that the fundamental structural constraints by the trilateral alliance in the Northeast Asia. And then suggest a very interesting point was suggested the technological cooperation as a means to begin building a new structure of the interdependence that can mitigate the global power competition in the region and tensions. Thank you very much for the insightful observation. And let's move on to Ms. Tong-suk.
So now that our panelists have mentioned the realist and also the constructivist point of view, I will contribute by having an argument that's pretty much institutionalist at the time. So I would say, first of all, I am quite optimistic about this. So just like I said earlier, a lot of Asia's institutions were built to avoid difficult issues, to avoid the unresolved historical grievances. So they're good at managing surface-level coordination, but not built to handle deep-rooted political tension or historical grievances. So take Northeast Asia, for example. So just like mentioned earlier, Northeast Asia, Asian countries, they're not really trust each other. So having a cooperation is really hard. So that's also why we need to address that trust issues as well. So we can see that, for example, South Korea, Japan, China, they are deeply interconnected economically, but their political relations remain really tense and unstable. So a big part of the problem is the unsolved historical memory and disputes over wartime atrocities, and that keep resurfacing because it has never been addressed. And these issues often get pushed aside in formal diplomacy because the institutions that we have today, it allow that kind of pushing aside the political issues that are hard to address. So especially during this Trump era, it is also really weak. When that kind of pressure arises, they came back even stronger. So if we want to move forward, I think countries in the region need to invest in mechanisms that deal directly with these tensions. So that could mean a lot of things. So I would say that it is quite abstract and optimistic, but at the same time, we have the real evidence of this in the international stage, and we have tested mechanism as well. For example, we have things like joint historical commission, what France and Germany did, where they have the joint historical textbook and joint effort to rebuild the same historical narrative so that they can understand each other and fix the trust issues. We also have joint border cultural projects. Bosnia and Croatia also did that by restoring the religious site, and I think that also applies in Thailand and Cambodia case as well. We have bilateral truth dialogue, and actually I believe that Japan and Korea has attempted at this as well, but it has not been successful yet. But at the same time, it doesn't mean that we have to completely abandon that kind of thing, but it also means that we need to improve this kind of mechanism. We need to invest in it. Or maybe a bilateral truth dialogue, truth-seeking commission, like in South Africa. And also we should have a multilateral platform that encourages dialogue so that we can address conflicts appropriately. And that doesn't mean that we need to build new things. We can develop from existing mechanism. Now we have like ASEAN Regional Forum. We have, I think that is called ASEAN Institute for Peace and Reconciliation. Many might not have heard of it because it has not done anything much, but it has a research. But it started from the research of the cooperative building. And I think that is a very good start, even though one cannot say that it has been successful, but we can develop from that. So I think that is how we should address this unresolved conflicts. So as power competition between US and China continues to shape the region, and the danger is that these tensions get politicized by outsiders. And just like I said, we have the conflicting identities, and it can get politicized by outsiders like external powers as well. So that's why Asia needs new kind of cooperation. We need one that just doesn't focus on shared markets or threat balancing or many big frameworks that, of course we need that, but at the same time we need to address the conflicts that has been unsolved as well, because that is what blocking the cooperation. But so that's why we need to actively address how people in the region interact with each other so that we can build the confidence and cooperate with each other. So I know that it's very optimistic and it's very difficult to achieve and it's very easy to say, but at the same time, if we achieve that kind of mechanisms, if we achieve that kind of cooperation, it will be much more long-lasting than the frameworks that doesn't work today. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. The very consistent prescription to your diagnosis. So you suggest that the issue of memory has been the kind of fundamental issue, and you suggest that issue, the issue of memory, need to be resolved, and also brought about some cases like the Joint Historical Commission and bilateral truth dialogue, etc., which can be developed into a multilateral framework or the network as a foundation of cooperation building. And in order to do that, we may have to depoliticize the issue of identity and memory. And thank you very much for suggesting optimistic kind of viewpoints. Okay, thank you. And let's move on to Mr. Tong So Lin.
So thank you for me. I think this is the important point to discuss. So if we say our allegiance is in the critics conditions, it might be that. So then we need to have a treatment plan to that realistic, not the idealistics. So from my perspectives, so we cannot solve everything at once. So maybe history, statistics, rivalry, and the structural asymmetry will persist. So, but we can manage these issues by focusing on it might be the three prescriptions. So the first is might be we should invest in the flexible issues-based diplomacy instead of the trying to form one big alliance. So we can build the cooperation around the concerned issues like the energy security or disaster relief or digital connectivities. So these areas are less politically sensitive and more acceptable. So we have seen this work toward the mechanism like the ASEAN Part 3 and the East Asia Summit before. Or the second point is about the Asia must prioritize the inclusive regionalisms. So not block politics, like a small and medium-sized country like Laos or Indonesia or Thailand must not be forced to choose side in the U.S. or China competitions. A balanced, open regional order will be more sustainable than any exclusive security agriculture. The third point is we need to strengthen a regional institution, but not necessarily to copy the Western models. Like ASEAN loans should be enhanced, not as a military alliance, but as a center of the gravities for dialogue, trust building, and the crisis preventions. The institution matter not because they solve the conflict overnight, but because they provide a continuity and predictabilities. So, from here, the core is the removing all conflicts. It is managing different toward the pragmatisms, regional ownerships, and institutional patterns. I would thank you. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Tong Lin. And that's a very interesting concept, the minilateralism. Yes, this idea of an approach to build kind of multilateralism, beginning with some small areas that can build cooperation right off the bat. And then step by step, we will be able to build the network or framework of multilateralism by beginning with some kind of small kind of areas. Okay, an interesting approach. Thank you. And let's move on to Ms. Sekardiati.
Okay, thank you for the questions. My opinion, in the area of uncertainty surrounding U.S. foreign policy under the Trump administrations, Asian countries need to strengthen regional cooperation to respond to challenges. ASEAN needs to reduce dependence on a single country or region, especially in the term of trade and investment. Also, focus on regional economic integration, strengthening regional supply chains, and resilience against external geopolitical pressures. For example, ASEAN can exchange conflict resolution mechanism and expand cooperation in areas such as digital economy or clean energy. ASEAN countries also avoid absolute alignment with any single major power bloc by maintaining good relationship with all major power like U.S., China, the European Union, India, without becoming the part of direct confrontations. Increase the national power, also the solutions. Food, energy, digital, and infrastructure powers must be strengthened to ensure the country is not easily affected by external pressures. Investment in research, education, and strategic industry like AI, green technology is also the key. Also, as I mentioned before, utilize regional forums like ASEAN and the East Asian Summit to discuss strategic issue and seek joint solutions. Strengthen partnership with other countries is one of the solutions. For close ties with countries outside the U.S., such as the European Union and Australia, to reduce the dependence on a single country. Yeah, I think that's my opinion. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Ms. Secretary suggested some kind of more economic side of solutions, the pushing forward the economic and industrial interdependence and cooperation, as well as kind of diversifying the kind of economic interdependence to beyond the United States and China. And it's very, very interesting, the approach and suggestion. Thank you. And let's move on to Ms.
Thank you. So I try to give a people level and a country level prescription for the Asian stable relationships or cooperation, and especially how Japan can contribute Asian new stability and security. Since I think most of all panelists thinks colonial past is a really important Asian characteristic, and I think that Japan is a really important actor when we see the historical issues or colonial past in relation with security issues or stability issues. So firstly is a country level. Since unlike Europe, Asia is characterized by remarkable diversity in terms of the political system or the stages of development, economic development, or historical conflict, or something like that. So under such conditions, or in this context, prioritizing sub-regional cooperation and also the use of multi-layered diplomatic strategy is a really important and also the way to contribute the building of stability for Japan. Firstly, Japan continues to position the Japan-US alliance as the cornerstone of security in the Asian region. And in light of destabilizing factors such as North Korea's nuclear development or China's growing military presence, I think maintaining this kind of deterrence in cooperation with the United States is actually important diplomatic strategy for Japan. And moreover, ASEAN has successfully built mutual trust among relatively similar small countries or similar small states, and which later expanded into broader cooperation with East Asia, ASEAN +3. So in particular, while it is really difficult for Japan to take a leading relationships or leading role in East Asia, or have trusted strong cooperative relation due to the unresolved historical issues, Japan is perceived as a really quite a stable and constructive and also non-military partner in its relation with Southeast Asian or South Asian countries with a non-military or peace-seeking way of the diplomatic strategies such as ODA support or educational support or something like that. In that point, like using of this geopolitical distinction, Japan has developed the sub-regional diplomacy with ASEAN, India, or any other countries, thereby establishing regional buffers. And I believe such linkage and a buffer mechanism is really important to counter the China's unilateral dominance and the U.S.-China's confrontation in East Asia. So I think the use of this kind of multi-layered strategy, diplomatic strategy, is important for Japan, or important role for Japan that can take. And for the students level, since as BPAB explains the importance of identity and how identity affects the policy or the relation with other countries, and I see the Japan becoming a really key actor in historical issues in here, it might be really important to consider the students' identity level, how we have to deal with. And in Japan, because Japanese youth, many of whom have lost the opportunity or sufficient education on Japan's past colonialism and wars due to the limitation of compulsory education and also the stance of the current government. So that's why they are likely to have an effect from the right-wing narrative on the internet, especially the Twitter or Instagram. However, at the same time, Asian countries started to have a stronger students' connection through the cultural interaction, which can be positively evaluated. However, at the same time, this kind of cultural interaction can be an issue, creating the gap between the historical perception against the South Korea or any other country or cultural perception. So that's why for the students level, we need an effort to to make an opportunity or international dialogue, make the cultural interaction as a catalyst for the further understanding of more academic or historic issue of each other country. So this is my observation how the Japan contribute the Asian building the Asian stability or Asian institution. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And the narrator suggested the multi-layered diplomatic approach, and the ASEAN is believed to increase mutual confidence and cooperation, and it has been expanding. And it might be able to serve as a platform to build a larger body of political cooperation at the end of the day. And the ODA and other intra-regional cooperation and support will expedite this process. And the educational approach is also suggested on the historical issues, which is also suggested by the Dong-suk on the issue of memory. And thank you very much for the prescriptions. Now, so before moving on to the final remarks and concluding comments, so we have a large audience here, so let's listen to some questions from the floor. Okay, yeah. So by the way, so that this is being aired via YouTube, so please smile. I think we do have a microphone. Yeah, over there.
Yeah, hello. As a graduate student, I learned a lot from my friends and old colleagues. Thank you so much for this great panel. As I said before, as a graduate student, I really like the meta-theoretical debates, as you mentioned, the realism, the institutionalism, and constructivism, but under the title of East Asia. And after 6 years in my experience in Korea, I realized that it's not possible to understand this region with the Western experiences and all the theories that comes from their own historical experience. So they failed in the realism, so it's not possible to understand the North Korea maybe under these well-known theories. So of course we have to build the trust. Of course we have to create institutional dependencies and economic problems. But it's obvious that after the thought crisis with China, all the dependencies become meaningless, or problems with Japan, all the things all of a sudden broke, and all the institutional dependencies become meaningless. So my question is coming from that side. So the system is built in the East Asia by the help of the United States, especially after the Second World War. Now we are calling a San Francisco system, which is totally different with the system they build in the European countries. So they are horizontally equal actors in the region, but here horizontally nobody is equal. Sovereignty issues is a problem, and recognition problems is a huge kind of an aspect. So don't you think that international level problems needs to be solved at the first side, and after that we need to talk about the other detailed issues? So my questions may be also meta-theoretical question, maybe it might be, but I want to learn from my colleagues. So thank you so much.
Okay, thank you very much for the question. And so actually that's one of the conventional kind of answer to the Asian paradox. So unlike the European nations, the Asia has been actually was incorporated under the Cold War system, and the so-called hub and spoke system was established, centering on the United States. And all the bilateral relationship has been interrupting the building of regional body of political cooperation. So we have some constructivists, and anyone wants to respond to the question? Yeah.
Well, but like I would not identify myself as a constructivist nor a institutionalist, and I'm more of like a fervent realist. But then, allow me to make more of like an institutional and like constructive defense to your question. You are absolutely right that there is a parallel difference between Asia and Europe, and there is a difference even among Asia. Certainly, we cannot really parallel the East Asia's like strategic competition and versus the Southeast Asia's like institutional and also ideational cooperations. But then on other notice, East Asia in particular has done relatively well considering that there hasn't been a major war for the last 60 years. Well, unfortunately, one of those wars involved my country, but then. So what could call is that, like, despite like the institutional and also ideational absence of sense of cooperation, and despite the strategic cooperation, then how was this like region was able to manage until now? Well, as a realist, I would say that the strategic stability has functioned quite well. But then also, there is, I would argue that there is like a sense of shared identity that like people fear and also caution against the use of forces and the disruption of the strategic stability. I guess like this fear, also like the sense of vulnerability is kind of the idea that we can share, and also it could be like an ideational ground for the institutional our cooperation because we share the interest of survival, especially in this particular region that like the Earth's like most great powers are concentrated within like the radius of 3,000 kilometers. We could also share the idea that like any kind of confrontation, any kind of grievances could escalate into could aggravate threaten our existential like being, and that is probably the basis of our agreement that could foster the ground for institutional and identical cooperation, and that would in turn strengthen the strategic stability, which as a realist I care about. But thanks for like your like very good question. I hope this answers but partially of your listen.
Thank you very much. And so we have only 5 minutes left. So why don't we have some final comments or the concluding remarks? And each panelist will have 1 minute. Okay, so let's begin with Mr. Lee.
Okay, thanks everyone and panelists. Nice insights from different perspectives and positions. Last, I want to say the youth are the hope of East Asia, but they are the easiest to the manipulation by ultra-wing nationalism and other extreme ideology. So I think today's discussion is a good chance to exchange people to people. Yeah, I think this international control and people to people exchange among youth to a strategic priority. In today's discussion is an excellent example, I think. So my sincere thanks to the Korean Foundation for International Exchange for organizing the important event. Thanks very much. Thank you.
And thank you. Mr. Chung?
Well, as Professor Kim has pointed out, well, now we're standing on this straight round table, which sort of shows the irony of like this region as well. Despite its like deep interdependence and also this like human and cultural exchanges, the region is amidst the conflict. And as I said before, well, despite the region that was not involved in the major war for the 50 years, but then still there are dangers looming, which we should be cautious about. So I call my colleagues and also everybody to be like aware of these dangers, and like, probably this awareness would be our ground for like our cooperation and also our human friendship. And I thank all the friends that I have met today, as this is the kind of opportunities where like friendships and cooperations would give, and this kind of maybe friendships at the individual level could grow into the like cooperations at the state, and that is what I deeply hope. Thank you, everybody, and also I thank them, like the Korea Foundation and also the Korean Association of International Studies to give me the opportunity to speak. Thank you.
And Ms. Dong-soo?
So first of all, thank you very much for this discussion, and I am very glad to have met all the colleagues and new friendship here. So I made a joke earlier about being an institutionalist or others being realist or things like that. But to be honest, I don't like to identify myself as an institutionalist, realist, or constructivist because I think these kind of different perspectives, I think we all need to combine them together in order to counter the challenges that we're challenging today in Asia. So that's why I really appreciate today's discussion, and I have gotten many perspectives that I think would be really would be the opportunity for us to develop into a strong cooperation in the future. So thank you so much also for the Korean Foundation for organizing this discussion roundtable, and I hope we can discuss more on this after the roundtable. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Dong
Yes, thank you again. I'm honored to be here today to be the part of the participants. So thank you, Professor Kim, and all the discussions people. So today's discussions has so that the East Asia should challenge on the historical regaxes, security dilemma, and the external pressures. So cannot be solved by the copying Western model or the relying on the bloc politics. Instead, what we need is the regional ownerships of flexible, inclusive cooperation that reflect our own realities. As someone from the Southeast Asia, I see while in the Asian style, diplomacy is not perfect, but the pragmatics. So we don't need to erase a difference. We need to manage them toward the dialogue, mutual respect, and the pretend institution buildings. So in this complex and multidisciplinary era, trust is not given. It must be built step by step. That I believe is our shared responsibility moving forward. Thank you.
Thank you. And the Ms. Secretary?
Secretary, okay. Okay, first of all, thank you for the opportunity and the questions and also the time to discuss about the great topic. But to end today's discussion, I would like to highlight, actually I have two, but let me just shortly one. Actually, I really want to highlight about the Asia. Rather than the aligning rightly with one bloc, Asian nations should craft independent, pragmatic strategy that promote regional stability, economic diversification, and multilateral cooperation. Unity within Asia, especially through Asian and regional trade framework, is essential to navigating fragmented global order while safeguarding nation interests. Yes. That's for me. Thank you very much.
Thank you. And finally, Ms. Narita.
I'm Pastry. This is my really first experiences of participating this kind of academic discussion or conference. So I try to give a really I try to appreciate to the Kai's Professor Kim and also the wonderful discussant and having me and discussing with me. It was really good opportunity and experiences for me. And honestly speaking, I have had a kind of optimistic idea that Asia is safe or Japan is peace or something like that. But the reality is, as we discussed, there is an ongoing conflict and instability, and also there is a resurgence of the militarism or kind of assertive stance in Japan. I think discussing how to build the cooperation or in the first place to understand what is happening in Asia is really important, and I believe that the historical issue is a really key in East Asian country. And as a graduate student studying this kind of issues, I try to make more effort to understand this kind of historical perception and also the historical conflict in the diplomatic issues. Thank you very much. It was really fun to discuss with really wonderful panelists. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And so we have navigated a variety of issues that have been ailing Asia. So, and common emphasis was given on the multilateralism and building mutual trust and confidence to resolve the complicated issue of history, security, economy, and national identity, as well as the roles of the Asian nations to mitigate the growing tensions at global levels, even though all the environment and conditions are unfavorable. But let's have a hope, fingers crossed. And thank you, panelists, for offering and sharing your insightful and invaluable thoughts and insights. And thank you for joining us for the final session of the 2025 annual meeting of the Korean Association of International Studies, either on site or via YouTube. Again, I would like to express my gratitude to the Korea Foundation and the Korean Association of International Studies for this wonderful event. Thank you very much.